Well, we have lots of questions tonight from the experts, for the experts, and we are happy to be joined this evening by a terrific panel. We have Dr. Saad Omer, who is the director of the Yale Institute for Global Health, who's joining us from New Haven, Connecticut. We have Dr. Guido Vanham, who's a very well-known Belgian virologist. Dr. Rommel, who's the associate director of internal medicine with Max Healthcare, is joining us from here in Delhi. Thank you, doctors, all of you, for joining us. We're all going to listen very keenly to what you all have to say. Dr. Omer, let me come to you first and ask you about what a lot of us want to know is this race for a vaccine. Now, we're reading all kinds of reports. We know that there are many trials, studies that are already underway around the world. Most reports say that you're not going to get a vaccine until 2021. But we also saw some reports out of the UK this week that we might get one as early as September. So can you shed some light on when you realistically expect a vaccine to be available?
Yeah, so it's a good news, bad news story, or good news, not so good news story. So the good news is that biologically speaking, we have some really promising candidates that were developed very quickly. And they're already, at least 4 of them are in human trials. The not so good news story is that there is a lot of uncertainty. Once you bring a vaccine to trials, you go through phase 1, 2, 3 trials with increasingly large numbers to test efficacy and safety. And sometimes you license after phase 2 or phase 2B trials, so you can shorten that period sometimes. But there is uncertainty. You don't know how a vaccine will behave in human populations. So it is reasonable to say that to expect something in 2021. There may be outliers in the sense that if we get an unexpected good news, but I would say that we should be realistic about our expectations, specifically from a policy planning perspective for looking at 2021 mid or spring to summer 2021 at the earliest.
Dr. Vanham, do you share that cautious optimism that Dr. Omer shares about when we'll actually have a vaccine? And I think another question a lot of people have is, will we all have access to it depending on who gets there first? Dr. Vanham.
Yeah, it will of course depend on which kind of vaccine will finally be developed. So it can be a very simple vaccine, such as an inactivated virus, which we have experience with in the 50s, or it can be a very complicated one, such as a vector adenovirus 5 vector virus, which will take much more time to develop, safety studies.
All right,
so
go ahead.
The other point is, of course, that we do not have any evidence yet that a vaccine will work. That is the big bottleneck. You need to do these phase 3 trials. They take months at least, and the result can be.
Well, that's important what you're saying, that we first have to know whether a vaccine will even work. Dr. Rommel, is that what doctors are stumped by about this virus, just the uncertainty of it, the newness of it? We're going to take a lot of time, I guess, to understand it.
Yeah, see, vaccine development is a very complex process, and it takes many years, lots of stages where you have to do testing, and it has its own challenges. Normally, in a vaccine, it takes 10-15 years to develop a vaccine, and you need lots of funds, lots of dollars for that. But in this case, we're hopeful that it will take 1.5 years for us to develop a vaccine against COVID-19, because lots of researchers and scientists all over the world are working on it. But having said that, it has its own stages of development. Like that is the preclinical stage, then the clinical stage. In the clinical stage, you have the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials, and then the regulatory review, then the approvals, and then the manufacturing and quality control. So you see, you have to go through all that. See, we can bank on the vaccine, but we can't be totally dependent on it because it has its own limitations as such. We don't have a vaccine against HIV. We don't have a vaccine against hepatitis C. We don't have a vaccine against SARS and MERS. So we also have to see how efficacious it is, the safety profile, and how long will the immunity last. As of now, there are 70 vaccine candidates all over the world on trial, out of which 3 have moved on to the human trial stage. and 2 are from America, which are in the first phase of trial, and 1 is from China, which is in the second phase of trial. So WHO has also invited experts from all over the world to work on it. And then India has 6 companies, Bharat Biotech, Zydus Cadila, Serum Institute working on it. And then there are countries like Australia, Canada who are working on it. And so you see a lot of work is being done all over the world as far as the vaccine goes.
What gives us hope is that because this is a global pandemic, that everyone's resources and energies and money is all sort of geared in the same direction in that sense. But in the absence then of a vaccine, and then when you look at treatments, Dr. Omer, today we've heard, in India's national capital, the announcement that the blood plasma therapy is now going to be, tried in more and more patients who are seriously ill. How do you see that? I know that it's gaining a lot of interest in the US and it's being used more and more. But, do you see that as something that's very promising in the short term, at least?
Yes, promising, yes, but with, again, a note of caution. So we are in a pandemic, and data is not a distraction even in a pandemic. So there are 2 broad approaches of doing it, to throw the kitchen sink at the problem and try everything that exists. And there is another way of doing it, which seems to be happening with increasing frequency, which is to say, okay, these are the potential options based on the biology, based on the history from other infections and other diseases, etc., and other treatments. And we're going to try out things systematically in trials, collect data, randomize people in certain situations. They can be non-randomized trials as well, depending on the risk-benefit calculus in a given situation. And then we will improve our clinical practice. We will change our clinical repertoire based on those data. So using plasma has increasing evidence. That's been done the right way, by sort of generating evidence and then quickly improving practice, broadening the use, looking at it again, and so on and so forth.
But Dr. Vanham, what do you think of blood plasma therapy? And, there's also another interesting question again about, antibodies, because we're going to be doing a lot of these blood antibody tests as well. And there is also an unknown, isn't there, about those who do get infected, do they develop long-term immunity or not? That's another unknown as well, isn't it?
The country that has most data is China, of course. And until now, there is no evidence that people who were recovered have been infected again. So that is a good sign. That's the first thing. The second thing is, of course, that plasma therapy has been used successfully in some diseases, like hepatitis B, but unsuccessfully in, for instance, hepatitis C or HIV. There is also data from China that about 30% of the people who have recovered do not develop neutralizing antibodies. So antibodies that can block the virus. So if that is the case, of course, serum therapy will not universally be successful, and you could expect success of 60 or 70%.
That's not bad, though. I guess in the times that we live in, if we have 60-70% success rate, I guess we'll take whatever good news we can get. And as you both warned, is a bit of trial and error. In fact, Max Hospitals, Dr. Tickoo, is the first hospital in India to have actually tried blood plasma therapy on 2 patients. Are you optimistic about using it here?
Yeah, I'm optimistic about it because whatever data we have, it's shown that it's quite promising. Though all the evidence is anecdotal till now, but there are 2 studies which were done in China. One was done in Shenzhen, which showed that it was given to 5 very critical patients who were on ventilators. And within 2 weeks, their ARDS completely resolved. At least 4 of them had their ARDS resolved. And they were able to wean off 3 of those patients within those 2 weeks. And then there's another study from China. It's being used in South Korea. It's being used in America also. Though the evidence is anecdotal, we need large-scale randomized controlled trials on this. But again, having said that, in MAX, we used it on a patient on compassionate grounds as an off-label use because the family wanted us to do something to save him. He was anyway not doing well. And after taking them into confidence and taking consent and going through the ICMR guidelines, we did transfuse plasma to this patient, and fortunately he's doing well, and we plan to wean him off the ventilator in the next few days. But again, we need more trials. There is a need for more evidence on this, because whatever treatment is being used all over the world right now is under investigation, and most of the treatment doesn't seem to be very promising. But whatever evidence we have in this case, as convalescent plasma has been used in the past as well with SARS and even with MERS and Ebola. So I think we can use it on compassionate grounds, and Max has also written to ICMR to involve them in the trial for the convalescent plasma, and hopefully it should work.
Looking at how India and the rest of the world is doing at the moment, Dr. Omer, let me just ask you about testing. Now, the US is definitely testing more than India, but there are complaints that the US is also not testing enough. Is that a concern that you have? And how important is it also for a country like India, which has the world's most stringent lockdown in place? You have more than 1 billion people who are confined to their homes and will be, for the most part, for about a 6-week period. Now, is this the time that India needs to use to ramp up testing in a big way?
You're absolutely right. Well, I have a lot of empathy for the policymakers to go into a mode where there was a major lockdown. India is a big, robust country. And in order to get things under control, it was absolutely helpful to go into that mode. And as you pointed out, the long-term, even the medium-term strategy is to buy time for easing these restrictions, not just slowly, but safely. And testing becomes part of that. It's at the core of that strategy. But it's not sufficient. It should be paired with mass contact tracing, early isolation and quarantine, even if it's at home, etc. So now coming back to developing testing capacity. So in many parts of the world, there are bottlenecks in lab capacity of any kind. India has less of that problem. India has, even at the peripheral level, has reasonable lab capacity. The question is, the tests that are available for this kind of virus or for this virus, they are not everywhere. So this is a good news but cautious optimism story as well. That seems to be the theme for this virus, at least at this point. There is the possibility to ramp up testing within India to at least much more, maybe not to the ideal levels, but to much more during the period that you are buying by this substantial national level intervention of mass social distancing, mass lockdown.
Oh, Dr. Tickoo, would you agree with that we need to expand testing urgently in the next 3 weeks that we are locked down? And why do you say, I mean, how are you looking at the data that's coming out in the last few days? Because today, at least for the second day in a row in India, thankfully, mercifully, we saw a sort of a downward trend in the number of cases, and the number of deaths, remarkably, has been very low for a country as big as India.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. We have to ramp up the testing, because now we'll have to go with what the WHO has been saying, test, test, and test. Earlier, we didn't have enough test kits with us, but now that we are expecting more and more kits, and it's being manufactured in-house also, so we should ramp up the testing. And now we're doing, ICMR says we're doing about 30,000 tests a day. And in the coming few weeks, they plan to target about 1 lakh tests a day, which is a good number, I would say. And they're also doing the rapid antibody tests now, though the rapid antibody test has its own limitation because it is not a confirmatory test and can be false negative in the first 1 week. But it again tells you about the immunity status. And in Britain and other countries, they give you immunity certificates sort of so that you can go back to work. So testing at this stage, I think, is very, very important. And we are looking at it and doing it well. ICMR is doing a good job as far as testing is concerned. And coming to the numbers, if you look at the last 3 days, definitely the numbers are going down in India. On 13th of April, it was 1,200 odd cases, and 14th it was 800. And last, which was yesterday, was 800. So I don't know about today, but the trend is definitely going down, and the mortality is around 20-30 cases a day. Definitely, I would say it's a good sign. And with the lockdown and the ramping up of the testing and the healthcare facilities and tracing the contacts, quarantining them, I think we'll be able to contain it by the end of the month. And looking at the other countries worldwide,
No, I hope it's good to hear doctors sounding positive in the middle of this terrible crisis. But just Dr. Vanham, we're seeing also in Europe now, some of the countries worst hit by the virus, the coronavirus, have also started to open up, including Italy, very slowly, including Austria, Poland, etc. Do you think that that's the right thing to do? There are some, the WHO seems to be a bit concerned about, restrictions being lifted too soon. But do you think that it's okay?
Yeah, well, it depends on how fast and in what way the restrictions are lifted. Because the main thing is this social distancing and hygiene measure. Because, I heard a lot about testing, but you know that the test is not 100% sensitive, that there is a lot of asymptomatic people that can spread the disease unnoticed. So this epidemic will not end in a few months. It will stay with us until the entire world is vaccinated. So that is not going to happen in the coming 2 years. All the time the epidemic will continue, maybe at a slower rate. So we have to maintain a certain number of measures to slow down and to mitigate the epidemic. And that is mainly this social distancing and this hand hygiene. Washing with water and soap many times a day.
That's important. What you're saying, that in a sense we have to live with COVID-19. It'll become a part of our lives. Maybe it'll be seasonal. We don't know that yet either, and therefore that's why every doctor says that our lives will change even after this. The way social distancing, washing your hands, wearing a mask, maybe all of these might just become the new normal. Final question, Dr. Rommel, Tickoo, let me ask you. A lot of people were alarmed today because a pizza delivery boy in Delhi tested positive, and then 72 families have ended up getting quarantined. So I think a lot of folks want to know, is it okay to order food? Is it okay to order takeaway?
Well, I would say it's okay to order food, but we have to take precautions and we have to make sure that we clean the outer surface of whatever package we're receiving. And at the same time, we also have to wear a mask, maintain a distance from whoever we are collecting it from. And the employers also should make sure that they should screen these people who are delivering. Because in this case, I believe this person wasn't well and he was coughing for quite some time. And the employers should screen their employees for any flu-like illness, and they should not be allowed to deliver. So this is one main problem that we had in this particular case. But if we manage to do this, screen them, then it shouldn't be a problem. And from our end, when we receive the package, clean it, sanitize it, take out the food, warm it. Anyway, warming it will kill the virus. And these are the precautions which we are supposed to take. But again, I would stress on any person who's having a flu-like illness and is delivering, he should stay at home and inform his employers. And employers from their end should at least make sure that they test them, treat them, or whatever needs to be done about them. But by and large, yeah, it's safe, but take precautions. That's what I would say.
Okay, well, that's a big relief. Thanks for that, Dr. Tickoo. Thank you, Dr. Tickoo, Dr. Vanham, and Dr. Omer. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us and answering some of the key questions that we have on the coronavirus. Let's hope that there is progress sooner rather than later as far as medical science is concerned.